I once told a friend of mine what I do for a living. Now, his response was quite common. I don't believe in astrology. However, he was quite puzzled by my response to him, which was, well, you're a proponent of the scientific method. Why do you base your opinion on belief? And he was like, oh, no, I just used the wrong language. But he didn't. He was quite correct in stating that his opinion was based on a belief. There is one very significant misconception about science. Science is not a form of ideology like communism or capitalism or democracy or fascism or whatever. It's also not a form of religion, which is also a type of ideology. In fact, science in and of itself is simply a method of checking things, verifying if they are true or not. That is all science actually is. But since the Enlightenment movement, science is seen as an ideology in and of itself. This is partly because it was in opposition to the Catholic Church at the time, but also in reality it was a form of dogmatism that was adopted to combat the dogmatism of religion. However, as we all know, two wrongs don't make a right. And in today's world, we can see the problematic aspect of this indoctrination playing out in quite a few fields. For example, for a very long time, the scientific consensus was that mountain gorillas were just a myth. Yet today we know that is quite untrue. The same can be said about the extinction of the silicons, which now we know still live to this day. Another example would be the idea that ulcers are caused by excess acidity in the stomach, which was proven to be incorrect, yet was so widely upheld that to prove it incorrect took a very long time. Another example would be the consensus that Troy was a myth, until it was actually found. These examples are quite numerous, but they show the fallacy of believing that science is somehow an ideology. The reason science is better than religion or any other form of thought in explaining the world is very simple. Science gives us the tools to verify every single thing it claims. This becomes quite amusing when one hears the claims of atheists, for example, which basically state that they are atheists because of science. But if we take the scientific method as a methodology, not an ideology, in fact, one cannot ever claim that atheism is based on any form of science. Let me explain. Let's say I make the claim that there are no elephants in this room. Now, this claim is both verifiable, as in someone can come in and check the room for the presence of elephants, and also quantifiable, as in I have stated the quantity. Now, let's do the same with the claim of atheism that God doesn't exist. Well, first of all, you need to quantify what the concept of God is, and you need to make it specific enough and valid for everyone involved, so people don't just go and say, well, your idea of God is wrong. And if you're in India, well, good luck getting people to agree with what your idea of God actually is. Now, the second part is that you actually need to prove that your definition of God doesn't exist. So you basically need to scour the entire known universe and check every nook and cranny to see that no, there is no such thing as your definition of God. Now, both of these things are basically impossible in terms of, well, what we know of physics, for example. So the concept itself is definitely not scientific. Now the same applies if a religious person claims that God does exist. Unless he goes to God, grabs him by the beard and drags him in front of you, saying, "Hey, here's your proof," well, he has no scientific evidence for God's existence. So, strictly from a scientific standpoint, the only valid claim is agnosticism, as in, we don't know, and anyone who claims otherwise is simply a charlatan. I highly recommend you check the link below to a debate between some of the greatest scientific minds of our generation about the very question of atheism versus religion. Now things are quite a bit simpler in the case of astrology because at least we can agree on what it is. But when it comes to the scientific validity of astrology, things get quite a bit fuzzier. For example, most scientific studies from the 20th century has shown that astrology is not a reliable tool for predicting the future. On the other hand, more recent studies did show a correlation between the season at which you are born and your personality as you develop. Other studies showed a correlation between the popularity in social media and Gemini yogas, for example. Such studies become increasingly prevalent as time moves on, and it is in fact showing that there is scientific validity to at least some of the claims made by astrology. As such, any claim that astrology is somehow debunked or invalidated by science is currently false. Now, this brings us back to the point I was trying to make. Whether you believe or don't believe in astrology, it is a matter of belief, not a matter of science. Now, if you truly wish to have an informed opinion on the subject of astrology and whether it works or not, I recommend you check out my website called Vedic Medical Astrology. You'll find the link below. Thank you.